Welcome to an introduction to Agile. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of history, how we got to this point when it comes to using more Agile ways of working. I'm going to talk about different frameworks. I'm going to talk about things you often heard say about Agile from clients, some myths, and a few other things as well. Let's get started. So history of management, first of all. Now, 1900s management, this is all about the assembly line. So all the decision making was separated out. So just the management were the ones who are saying, this is what you do, this is how you do it. The workers, those on the floor, those factories, did nothing else apart from follow those instructions. So one set of thinkers and another set of doers. And this approach was very heavily influenced by a guy called Frederick Taylor. Can you imagine being on those floors? It must have been so boring just following the same things and essentially not being allowed to think. So that's 1.0. 2.0 in the 1950s. This is where TPS slash lean started to come into play because that simple repetitive work, so that 1.0 it kind of did work because the work was very simple. It was now becoming more complex, and obviously workers they weren't happy with that. They were getting bored. So 2.0 empowered workers to do things like stop the production line. Now, this is one that came from Taiichi Ohno and also from Toyota, and then W. Edwards Deming from the US, where you've got a flow of things happening on the factory line for building out cars. Something goes wrong or something's not working, a factory worker can actually stop the whole process, grind everything to a halt. Then everyone comes together to work out, right, how do we fix this? How do we improve? It's all about improving flow. So now we're certainly getting to a more agile way of working and using the brains that you've got available to, not just those ones up in that top office, which led to 3.0, which was all about agile. And this started in the 1990s. And it's because technology and software was starting to become prevalent and more complex. And waterfall started to fail because it didn't have, it's just its inability to predict in advance what was needed. When you've got a very complex project that maybe could take months, you cannot predict what's needed. So you needed that agility. And then Scrum was a framework that was introduced to allow for short iterations and feedback. And this is when the Agile Manifesto was created, which you can briefly see in the image there. Okay, that was a whistle-stop tour of the history of ways of working. First of all, some of the things you hear said about Agile, and you might relate to some of these if you're familiar with this way of working. We want to do Agile. Often used to hear this in RFPs when I was working in agencies or in client meetings. Not really sure what they're asking for, but they've heard about this new way of working that apparently it's much faster. So we want to do Agile, but not really knowing what they're asking for. We need to deliver this project using Agile, but I still need to know exactly what I'm getting. Now, I didn't have exactly these words, but it's basically this is what was said. Now, they're asking for a much more agile approach in their eyes, which was, I want to be able to change anything whenever I want to change it. And I want to make decisions when I want to make decisions. Basically, that equals chaos. But at the same time, tell me exactly how long it's going to take, what I'm going to get, etc., etc. And those two just cannot work together. There's going to be a problem there. Why can't you change this immediately? This is agile. I had this on a project where this client was continually changing their mind, really disrupting the team, not understanding the impact it was having on the overall timeline and things like that, and the impact on the morale. And just saying, well, we said we're going to work in an agile way, so why can't we just change it right now? Just a very naive approach, but ultimately it's just down to just not understanding what an agile way of working really does mean. Or we can't use agile as it just costs too much. So there's an understanding that if you work in an agile way, it costs more because it just keeps going and going and going. You never know what you're going to get and how long it's going to take, which again is not true. And then what Agile isn't, Agile is not a process. It's much more of a mindset or a set of values. So if you start there, that's a great place to start, because Agile isn't a process. Think about what Agile means in the dictionary. Literally like agility. It's all about agility. No matter how you're working, whatever methodologies, whatever projects you're doing, whatever teams you have, when you have problems, if you're able to go talk about them, change and improve, you're being agile. So it's not just about some of the more famous frameworks that are out there like Scrum. And then you can't do agile. You can only be agile. Because again, agile isn't a process, but you can be agile. You can pivot, etc., etc. And agile is not an excuse to stop producing documentation. It's about producing documents that are really needed and have value. So you'll see if you do look up the Agile Manifesto, it talks about collaboration versus documentation, but you document when you need it. If it's needed, add value, create a document. And Agile is not about blindly following a set of best practices. You might have a set of best practices and processes at the start of the project, but if they're not working and you don't change them, you're not agile. But if you do pivot and change, then you are agile. So it's all about adapting and improving everything you do. And agile is not an opportunity to eliminate planning. You actually plan more regularly with an agile way of working than you would do waterfall. And agile means agility, like I've already said a couple of times. It's not Scrum, it's not stand-ups. It's just your ability to move quick, easy, graceful, I should say, to be nimble and adaptable. And agile doesn't mean you are constantly changing everything either, or you can constantly change everything, because that's just chaos. The team need time to build things, but then you build things based on value and discussions that you've had already, that this is important, we should do it. You don't need to be changing your mind every 5 minutes. So where agile helps, and I'll explain with this, with the simple to chaos. Right, so you've got on the right there, uncertainty for what and the how. So if you're very certain on how you're going to do it and what you're going to do, then you're on that bottom left-hand section of this graph here. If you have no idea how you're going to do it and you have no idea what you need to do, then you're in the top right-hand corner there. So for some examples, simple, this is where that manufacturing sits, where you're doing the same thing over and over again, very little uncertainty. Well, that could be, you might have a simple landing page for a website that you've built many, many times, and you just change the branding, the colors for different clients and things like that. That is a simple project. Next, you've got complicated. So now we're moving into less about, we're not 100% sure about what we need and how we're going to do it. But you might know what to build or how to build it, but not both. So there's increased uncertainty. So building a bridge, which for some very complex, but if you built bridges before, you might know how you're going to do it, but you're not exactly sure what that bridge is going to look like yet, as an example. Then you've got the complex. So this is a real sweet spot for Agile. And this is typical product development where the customer has a rough idea what they want, but are not sure. So things can change frequently, but you can't remove all the uncertainty. So you manage it with fast feedback. So this is when agility becomes an advantage, because you've got a good idea about how you're going to do it, but you know you're going to need to pivot and change. What you're going to do, things can change within the industry. Your customers might change their idea of what they want. So again, that can change. So Agile is perfect for complex projects. Then the final one, which nobody wants, is chaos. You've got no clue what you're building and how you're going to do it. Just don't go there. Hopefully you never have done or will in the future. Right, a few Agile myths next. There's no planning in Agile. There definitely is. And as I mentioned earlier, I would say there's more planning in Agile ways of working, or an Agile approach versus waterfall, because you need to be thinking about your strategy first and foremost. why are we looking to do what we're needing to do? And then you might have your roadmaps below that, very, very high level. These are the things we need to do and create over the following year. And then below that, you might have your releases, which could be major releases, which could be once every, say, 6 weeks. And then within that, you might have your sprints, and then you're planning for the next 2 weeks. So it's yet another plan of what the team are going to work on. And within that, you've got your daily stand-ups, potentially. And that's another mini plan for what you're going to do today. So they all link together. So there's continuous planning at different levels, from day to weeks to months to potentially years as well. You can't have fixed budget with an agile team. That's not true, because my background is in agency world, so clients would always come to us with a fixed budget. And then it's up to us to help them first and foremost get an understanding of, is that enough for what they're looking to achieve, even if we don't know exactly what is needed at that point. But then it was up to us to manage that budget. So making decisions when we do pivot and change, what the impact of it is, and what's the sort of the minimum we need to be able to get to by a certain point. So you can definitely fix a budget with an agile team. If we start using agile, we'll get the work done faster. Just because you're working in a more agile way doesn't mean you can write code faster or create a project plan quicker or whatever the task is. But agile can help you be more productive as a team, because you're always looking at the flow of the team. You're always improving how you're working together. So agile, yes, actually the work might be done faster, but it's more about the environment, not the fact that someone can type faster. The team make all the decisions, so we lose control. Again, it's not true. Yes, you do use the team a lot more because you want the team to be able to come up with the best experience for whatever your project is, or the best output, which basically means you're using their skills, the ones you've hired them for. But then ultimately, the business owner or the product owner or whoever's making decisions on what this product or service needs to be, they make decisions on what's valuable for the team to work on. It's not the team who actually say, no, we're not going to work on that. We're going to pick something else, thank you. You always still have ownership there. Right, I'm going to take you through a couple of popular agile frameworks, one of which I've mentioned already, which is Scrum, which we'll start with. So the work is done within time box sprints, generally between 1 to 4 weeks, but typically 1 or 2. And I say 1 or 2 because in the Scrum guide, and I don't know, complete transparency if it still says this or not, but it used to be 1 to 4 weeks. But nearly all the teams I've worked with, we do 1 to 2. If you're building something, you've got engineers, it's nearly always 2. So there's enough time to actually build something before you replan and demo. And then 1 week I used to find for design teams only, that worked well as well. And ultimately the goal is to have something that's potentially shippable. So you're producing something that's ultimately finished. You're not going to ship it live at that point, that's very unlikely, but it's ready. So you're not half doing it. And you have a thing called a sprint backlog. So that's essentially, think of it as the to-do list. And you work through that backlog through time box sprints. And that process is repeated from sprint to sprint. And what's at the top of that backlog is what's the most valuable thing for whoever owns this product or service. So going back to the team making all the decisions, when I said, no, that's not true. This is where, if you are the company owner, ultimately you could be the one deciding what's at the top of that backlog. Teams are typically cross-functional. So that just means within a team in Scrum, a Scrum team, you've got everybody you need to be able to build that product, which could ultimately mean any type of role. It depends on the product itself. But if it's a website, you've got to have designers, developers, testers, etc., etc. The second one I'm going to talk about is Kanban. So very closely linked, but still different. But in Kanban, there's no fixed length sprints. Instead, the teams just pull tasks down from the backlog of what needs to be done. So again, the backlog is prioritized, but they're just continually working on something. Once that's done, they pull the next one down. So that backlog is continually prioritized, and the team can pull down a task at any point. So there's no sprint planning, just continuous delivery. And team members can be specialised as the task can be passed from one specialism to the next. Right, I'm going to show you what Scrum looks like in a 2-week sprint now, to give you a bit more context for what I was talking about before. So first of all, you have, let's get my mouse over here, make it a little bit more obvious, sprint planning. So this is where you select the highest priority features to deliver in the sprint, and then you also define the sprint goal. So as a team, you're sat down, you're looking at your backlog / to-do list, and taking the top one off, you talk about it, you put it into your sprint backlog, which is basically your to-do list for this next sprint, which is coming up for 2 weeks. Okay, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, I think that's probably going to take us about 2 days, whatever it might be. And then you do the next one and the next one until you get to the point where the team go, that's enough. We can't do any more. That sprint backlog is full. And you lock it down. That's what you're now going to work on for the next 2 weeks. And the team priorities are deliver the sprint goal. So the sprint goal might be, by the end of this sprint, we want to have a working settings page in our app. And the other priority is prepare for future sprints, which I'll cover in just a moment. Next is the daily stand-ups. So here's the stand-ups here. Every single day, as a team, you talk about what you did the day before, what your plans for the day, and do you have any blockers or issues? That's that mini plan that I was talking about before. Really helpful, super quick. Standard is 15 minutes. Boom, 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 boom. Everyone's updated. Help. Now let's get on with the work. And then you have the backlog refinement. So as I mentioned before, prepare for future sprints. This is what the backlog refinement is. So this typically happens in the middle of the sprint on around day 5. And what you're doing, the team are now talking about nothing to do with what's happening in this sprint, but they're going back to the backlog and they're looking at what's at the top of that backlog and discussing it. Do we understand it? Do we have what we need? Is it ready to be worked on? Which is really important. Is it ready to be worked on? Because they do that because when they come back to sprint planning again, they can do this job, and knowing that they can then take that into the next sprint and they should be able to work on it and be productive and not hit blockers and things like that, and not have loads of questions and not, oh, where's this and where's that? So sprint planning, and I'm talking about Scrum now, but sorry, backlog refinement. I'm talking about Scrum now, but that can be applied to any type of project, always looking ahead and refining those tasks to try and remove those blockers. And tasks are refined until they meet the team's definition of ready. Really important. Definition of ready means, has it ticked all the things we said we need to be able to work on this, which could mean all sorts of different things. Again, it's to help prevent the team being blocked. Then you have sprint review and retrospectives. These happen on the final day of the sprint. Typically, doesn't really matter though. You do the review first, and that's when you bring in the stakeholders or the client or whoever it is who could be paying for the product or making decisions on the product you're developing. And the team show the work they've done, show the progress, get feedback, generate new ideas that can go potentially back into that backlog as well. So there's lots of transparency. There's no hiding away for months working on this product. You're showing it to key people every couple of weeks. And then retrospective, you're talking about what went wrong. What do we need to improve? What do we need to start doing? Things like that. And that's showing that you've got agility. You're not only recognizing things that have worked well, but also didn't work well, and then coming up with mini plans on the most important things that you need to change going forward, so the team don't get frustrated and they can work efficiently, etc., etc. And that last one there is shippable components. So like I was saying before, you should be doing everything you need to do to be able to finish what you've been working on. So it's done, 100% done, because then you can move on to the next thing. If you don't do that, it just builds up lots and lots of debt that just builds up. And then when you want to release something, you've still got all this other work to do to get it ready. And it just has this compounding effect and just holds everything up. So that's why it's really important in some ways to, on paper, get less done, but it's ready. It is actually done, not half done. So that's Scrum. Next, you've got Kanban. So this is the Kanban board. And as I said earlier, the teams select the highest priority tasks to pull down to the board. So here's your backlog here. This is at the top. I'm a designer, right? I'll pull that one into design. I'm going to work on it. The Kanban ceremony. So this team still have ceremonies like stand-ups, but planning throughout. And releases can be continuous because it isn't bound by sprints. And task refinement in the backlog are refined throughout until they meet, again, that team's definition of ready. So the team will make the decisions on, we need to sit down and do some refinement together because there's not that much in the backlog ready to be worked on. And what you don't want to do is have nothing that's ready to be worked on, because obviously then the team are going to be blocked, which isn't going to help anybody. And again, the stuff at the top, high priority, stuff at the bottom, low priority. And you have a thing called WIP, work in progress. So each swim lane, I know I've put it on one here, but it's just to show as an example. It has a WIP to match the team's capacity and avoid blockages. Because flow is key with Kanban. You don't want lots and lots and lots of design tickets building up here. Lots of them are done, but they can't pass them over for the testers because the testers are still working on something, because there's too much going on. So things start to get blocked. Communication is not great because the designer is working on things potentially, I don't know, weeks before the tester even looks at it. You want a nice flow always going through. So if it does start to build up in design, then you have a conversation. But what you do agree is, testers, at any point we can only be doing 2 tickets at a time. We can't do any more than that. So you agree things like that up front, and you'd have the same for design as well. So it's all about flow. So summarize, you can't do Agile. You can be Agile though. Agile is not a process, it's a mindset or a set of values. You don't have to do full Scrum or Kanban. If you like the sound of some of these, take the bits that work well for you. Again, hybrid working, being Agile, go, actually stand-ups sound great. Just start doing that. If that's going to make a difference, it's going to improve how you work, pick that. Don't try and do everything in one go. Think about aspects of your projects that are Agile already, or if not, which aspects would benefit from this approach. So do a little review and just have a think about how you're working at the moment. And try new things. Some will fail, but then discuss why they have. And then rather than just kicking them out again, oh, that doesn't work, stand-ups, ridiculous. We spent an hour talking every single morning. It's a total waste of time. Ask yourself, well, why do we need an hour? Why is it taking that long? Adapt them and improve them. Don't just kick them out. Thank you. That's it. Introduction to Agile. Hope that had some good insights for you. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below this video. Happy to answer them for you.